One, can you hear me? Okay, great. Sorry about the delay, some technical issues. So hi everyone, my name is Avihu Levy. I'm head of product at Starknet. I am going to talk today about the principles for Starknet fees. Now, this is a 15-minute talk. So I had a bit more of ambitious plans to present you the entire mechanism and the reasons why we would go with this kind of mechanism and not another one. But I had to cut many things out of the presentation, so we will remain just with like the main principle and some idea about resource pricing. And if you are interested about the auction mechanism, I will be very happy to talk about it with you after the presentation. Okay, great. So let's start. Behind me, there is like the screen from Eric Wall. So I don't know if you guys know, but every time Eric is buying a new computer, he's also starting a thread on Twitter where he syncs his Ethereum node and the Bitcoin node and compares those. And he started the sync, the last one, 12 days ago. I know because I met him this morning. And he told me that it was just finished this morning. So as you can see, the synchronizing an Ethereum node is a pretty heavy operation, even for a new MacBook. And at some point, not always, but at some point, it requires like 100% capacity of the CPU. So how is it related to fees or to Starknet? Well, the thing is that when it comes to Ethereum, this Pacman on the side here is basically an Ethereum full node. And the way it works is that Ethereum full node needs to eat the blocks as they come. And that means that if a Pacman is now starting from like fresh without the knowledge of anything about the chain, it's going to be able to eat the entire chain before it's fully synced. And even if the Pacman is already fully synced and you get more blocks, you need to be able to process them. That in particularly means that when you design Ethereum, you need to consider basically not just the throughput that you as a sequencer or as a validator or as a builder can provide. You need to first of all consider the throughput that a full node can process, right? So, for example, if you think that a full node can process something like X computation steps per second, then it will mean that you will need to consider this on your network throughput. That's that's basic, right? We all know that. So if a full node does X computation steps per second, then if you want nodes to be able to synchronize in a reasonable time, you're gonna have to take a factor on that, right? So if your full node sync in is able to do X computation steps per second, then you will have your blockchain running at a speed that is some fraction of X. And that means that, and this will affect on the syncing time, right? So I'll give like a very concrete example that is also close to reality, right? If you have an Ethereum full node and you say, well, my Ethereum full node can do about 12 million gas per second, then let me have my blockchain running at a speed of about 1 million gas per second. That's more or less the numbers that we have on the target for Ethereum 1559 today. And if I just count with those two numbers and I throw away everything about optimizations, then you get that syncing 1 year of Ethereum at the current speed today, which is of course faster than what it was in the past, will cost you about 36 days, which is already pretty long. So it's not really the number today, and Eric was actually able to demonstrate a full sync in about, I think it was 12 days. But there are some factors that I'm like throwing away, and obviously Eric's new MacBook is not the slowest computer on the network, and those numbers always relate to the slowest node that you want to consider in the network. So basically, what we see is that when it comes to Ethereum, you are limited by a significant factor on your slowest full node, on the slowest full node that you want to include, which is a problem. On the other hand, we have Starknet, and Starknet is a validity rollup, is a layer 2 validity rollup, and in particular, that means that on Starknet, you don't, as a full node, need to process and eat all blocks. It's good enough for you to jump every time there is a new proof. This small little cube there is actually a new proof. Every time there is a new proof, you as a full node can jump over all the blocks, verify the proof, and BEF, you know that the new state that comes with this small proof is valid without running all the computation across all the blocks, right? So now when you think about it for a moment, you realize that the sequencer doesn't have to take consideration anymore of the slowest full node. It can actually run without full node slowing it down. And this is, if there is one thing you should take today, it's this. In Starknet, we design everything such that we reach maximum throughput and we don't have to take into consideration slow elements in the network, which is an amazing capability. Okay, so how is it related to fees? And I'll give one example, and if I will have a bit more time, I'll give the second one. So in Starknet, we don't look on what full node is capable of doing, which is this X, but instead we are looking on what a sequencer can do, which is Y, and most of the time Y is aggressive and is much larger than X. And then we limit our blockchain with those Y computation steps per second. And in particular, the synchronizing time for any full node on the network is going to be very, very short, basically just verifying proofs, which takes milliseconds, and independent of whatever we limited the computation on the network. Okay, some comments on this part. As a full node, you will have constantly fresh proofs, but you will not have the proof of the latest block, at least not for now in Starknet. You will have a proof for blocks few minutes old. So for most full nodes, most of the time this is good enough, but we should remember that there is some block proof time delay that comes from the times that it takes to generate a proof for the block. We target getting to like few minutes and maybe even sub-minute long term for proof generations for blocks. But in any case, it doesn't matter if you are a full node that is capable like a sequencer or a very weak full node. As a newcomer, you have very easy life on Starknet because you can take the proofs and you immediately get, or almost immediately get to the latest state. Okay, that's great. So that's the principle that we want to have. And now how we utilize it in fees. So I'll give one major example and the other ones if we have time. Okay, so pricing resources. Pricing resources is basically the question of like, okay, you have many operations, how do you charge users for those operations? And because we don't have so much time, I won't let you think about it, but instead I will just tell you. So we have the sequencer. This is the main resource that we should quantify. But we have three other things. One is also shared in Ethereum and two that are new. The second bullet here is talking about storage. And when I spoke about proofs and how you do as a full node sync really, really fast with proofs, I was a little bit lying. That's true for computation, but full node still has to eventually download and store the state of the network. And that means that while we can let the sequencer get crazy and take as much computation as they can, we can't really do the same with storage. Because if we would, that means that potentially storage can become several terabytes, and then it will be harder to access for full nodes. So proofs doesn't save really all the new storage, and we need to take that into consideration. That's not anything new, but we should remember that remains. And the last two bullets are actually new. So we have on Starknet this burden that means that for every block we need to generate a proof. So we need to take that into consideration, obviously. And as long as we publish data to Ethereum as data availability layer, we need to take also consideration a main cost, which is the L1 cost. Okay, so how do we price it? Here's the main suggestion, and I'm going to explain very, very shortly why is it the case. What we suggest to do is that users pay layer 1 costs separately, and on everything else they bid. Now, how do they bid? You can you can in general do a multi-dimension bidding, meaning you bid on the storage, you bid on the computation, you bid on the proving. But it's very, very hard practically for everyone else. Like it's hard for us, it's hard for users, it's hard for wallet. You don't want that. So instead, what we will do is we will keep the payment for L1 separately, but everything else, all other costs, all other limitation, we will just fold into what we call L2 gas. So I want to show how this folding is done. Okay, this is a complex table. Take a moment, and I'm now going over it. So the main resource that we care about, the major resource that we care about for throughput is the column that includes the sequencer. We want to make sure that users are very careful with sequencer times. So we are going to take sequencer time as the component, and we are going to fold all other dimensions to it in the following sense. Those are like, by the way, those are just examples for numbers. Those are not necessarily the most accurate numbers. It's just to show you how this is done and then what's the logic behind pricing, right? So on the sequencer, let's suppose that we have 10 to the 7 steps, and step is a random, arbitrary unit of time that we chose, because this is the time that takes a sequencer to run one Kairos step. And what we are going to do is every time, I will go over those examples, every time when we look on the prover and when we look on storage, we will compare the percentage that some operation is taking to the sequencer time. And if we get that the sequencer time in percentage is higher, we choose this. If we get that the percentage of the operation on a different column is higher, we will just convert it to steps. So in particular, if I'm looking on a new byte that people are writing, it doesn't cost the sequencer almost anything on time, but it does require storage. So we are going to price it as 1 unit out of 10 to the 5, but we are going to compare it to sequence time. So because the difference is 100, we will count a new byte as 100 units of L2 gas. And let me just give one more example, because this example is stronger. On the bottom, we have 3 different hash functions, right? So most of you are probably aware there is Pedersen, Ketchak, and Poseidon. What's interesting to see here is that Pedersen and Poseidon are hash functions that are very slow on the sequencer. So even that they are extremely cheap on the prover side, because they are so slow on the sequencer, it turns out that for Ketchak, which is terrible on the prover side, it might be the case that Ketchak will actually be cheaper for the network when you fold it into L2 gas than, for example, Pedersen, which is exactly what you would expect when you fold other dimension into the major dimension that you care about. Okay. So I said that multi-dimension is better, but it's complex. So the question is, what do we lose by not going multi-dimension? Well, on the usual, what we will expect on the usual case is the following. We would expect that most of the time what will be congested is the sequencer, and the prover and storage, we will get some requests, but they will not congest the network, and so the pricing will be close to optimal, meaning we will mostly price the sequencer. We won't reach full capacity, but that's fine. We can live with a small loss. But in the worst case, it might become that, in fact, most of the operations are being split somehow between the sequencer, the prover, and storage, for example. And then even though the network could do 3 times more operations in this case, we will already close the block on 1/3 of the capacity, which is not that good. And in particular, the more dimension you fold into one dimension, the more you are risking throughput loss. So this is something that we keep in mind, and we might change or update as the time comes and we see the actual demand. Okay, I'm getting to the summary. I know that I don't have so much more time. So to summarize, Starknet is not bounded by full node computation, and that means that everything that you see on the fees side, we optimize for throughput, and we don't need to worry to hard decentralization. This is like the bottom line. This is what we do. It affects everything. It affects the pricing that you just saw. It affects also auction mechanism. Come ask me about it later. By the way, we have a bunch of open questions. If you're interested about taking part in any of those questions, any research about them, please come talk to me after. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Do you have time for questions? Questions? Any question? Okay. Thank you very much.